What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the 14th episode of Xbox Chaturdays. Hope you're all doing fantastic. Today we are joined by Luke Lohr. You might know him on the Twitterverse as InsipidGhost. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about features that we want to see on Xbox, the mysteries of Xbox Game Studios, some backwards compatibility rumors, and a little bit more. So, Luke, thanks for joining me on this Saturday. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. I'm ecstatic to be hanging out with you. This is an absolute pleasure to get to talk shop with you, talk Xbox. You and I were, joshing before the show. It's rumor season. We've had a couple weeks of news. Now we've got rumors all around. There's going to be some good chat here. I'm excited, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it. I actually formally met Luke. I was aware of Xbox Expansion Pass and some of the stuff he was doing on Twitter previously, but we were on Game On Live a couple weeks ago, and we bonded over our shared love of Sea of Thieves. So
Mhm.
that'll probably come up at some point, just for funsies. But yeah, for those who aren't aware, give people a breakdown of who you are, what you do, and why you love Xbox.
Oh man, okay, so that's a lot. Well,
Yeah.
my name is Luke Lohr. Of course, I host the Xbox Expansion Pass, and my gamer tag and what I often go by is Insipid Ghost. And I host the Xbox Expansion Pass as a solo endeavor, and that podcast is meant to offer an analytical look at the gamerverse from a couple different perspectives. Really, how the gaming verse is impacting the Xbox ecosystem and vice versa. So if there's PlayStation 5 news that is relevant or might potentially impact Xbox, of course, I'll bring it up and discuss it. And I often feature guests on the show from all walks of life within the industry to, quote, expand our knowledge of the industry. Voice actors like Shelby Young, Sissy Jones, and on Monday's episode, David Bateson, who voiced Hitman and has for the last 20 years. I bring on engineers, developers from big studios, small studios, from indie to AAA, and I just love talking with all different types of people about how the gaming verse has changed over time and shedding light on places that we may not always know just from listening or reading different things. So that's what I tend to do. And I think your last question was why I love Xbox. Was that the last
That's
one?
it. Yeah, that's the last question there.
Goodness, that is a threaded topic right there. Uh, there's a lot of reasons why I love Xbox and why I love gaming in general, because I don't just love Xbox. I think sometimes we will say that we love one brand and then people think that we automatically dismiss the others. I
Mhm.
don't. I'm a multi-console gamer. I just happen to cover Xbox as a hobby. I enjoy it as a hobby outside of my day job. And I love Xbox, I suppose, for a lot of reasons. They've brought me a lot of light in dark times. I really entered into the Xbox gaming space when I was in college. I sold plasma to purchase an Xbox 360 because I really wanted to play Gears of War and try out Xbox Live for the first time. And through the years, something I've seen specifically from Microsoft and Xbox is their ability to support things that may not have come out well out the gate. And of course, the Xbox One generation is a good example of that. But I don't just mean hardware, I mean software. They've really nourished State of Decay, Sea of Thieves, the Master Chief Collection in ways that I find are very rewarding to early investors. And they're certainly doing a lot of the technology side that makes me feel as a consumer and as a gamer that my dollar is being respected. We don't always get to say that everywhere we go, but I love Xbox for a lot of reasons. They've cultivated a lot of franchises that I love. I read the books for Halo and Gears, and I invested in myself in the lore of Sea of Thieves and so many more experiences. And so there's a lot of reasons I love Xbox, but I suppose that's a few of them.
That is a beautiful answer. I appreciate that. Now that we've given all the reasons why we love Xbox, we're going to dive right in and talk about why we hate Xbox.
All
No,
right,
no, but
Connect
seriously,
2.0. Let's talk about it.
one main segment of this show, and I guess we'll just start with that. The positivity sandwich started off why we love Xbox. Then we're going to give a little critique on Xbox, and we're going to talk about features that we want to see on Xbox that aren't currently there, or areas that Xbox is missing the mark. Because in a lot of ways, Xbox is pushing a lot of great innovative ideas. They have a great suite of services. They're pushing innovative things like Xbox Game Pass and kind of reshaping how we consume games media. But there's also some areas platform side that they're, in my opinion, struggling. And if we look at other established platforms like Steam, PlayStation, there are some obvious things that they're missing. So I'll
Mhm.
kick it over to you first. As someone who, plays on Xbox, is an Xbox hobbyist, what are features that are obviously missing to you on the Xbox platform?
Features. So when I think about where Xbox is lacking, I think, like many people, my first instinct is to talk about exclusives and AAA experiences, and that's the first gut reaction. But I think they're working to address that by way of a number of things, but via acquisitions and repurposing of studios. And I don't think that's really the core of your question. When I think about features that are missing, some of them have already existed. Uh, Perhaps I'm thinking about right now the app at the moment. You can't open up and find a convenient way to look at your achievements or make purchases within the app. And those things existed not too long ago. And so it frustrates me to not have that ability. And that is oftentimes where I feel Microsoft's coming up short is in two steps forward, one step back. The rumor that I've heard often is that they were trying to appeal to Apple devices, and that's why some of those features went missing out of the app. And that kind of bums me out on a couple levels because they've been giving me so many different features now. The ability to access xCloud and play anywhere, touch on games from my PC, from my mobile device, from my Xbox in a near seamless transition. They've been embracing crossplay. I really like a lot of those things, but the first kind of touch on my first gut reaction is, man, I need that app to be cleaned back up to what I thought was really well worthwhile for making purchases. I don't like that I have to log into the web browser to buy a game now when I was once able to do that from the app, as it were. So that's a beginning to your question, I suppose, and I'll hear some ideas that you have and perhaps bounce some ideas back and forth there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You look at the current app, and I know Xbox
Mhm,
is in the process of streamlining everything across all
mhm,
ecosystems: PC, your phone, and your console. And I think stripping away some of those features helps them get in a position where they can start rebuilding that. But it
yeah.
is really disappointing that, you know, 6 months ago, maybe even less, we had a fully fleshed out app that had achievements, it had the store, it had all these social tabs. And now we can look at who's online, and we can look at games, and we can look at screenshots, and that's it. That is the extent of the Xbox app as it stands. And it's quicker. The last app had a suite of issues, a ton of just really bad performance across the board. So I
Mhm.
understand and I appreciate the fact that they just completely scrapped that and started over. But yeah, to your point, that eliminated most of the reason I used the app.
Right.
Achievements and the store were the two main reasons I used the app. Um,
Yeah.
so
Same.
having both of those gone is a huge bummer. Um, but again, yeah, I know they're in the process of building back up to this fully fleshed out platform. But like you said, two steps forward, one step back. A feature that's going to be a throwback for Xbox 360 peeps that I don't feel like enough people talk about. Every now and then I go on the Xbox Insider app and I see the occasional person mention this, and I'll immediately upvote it. But who remembers Netflix Xbox parties? That feature where you could basically use your avatar in a virtual movie theater and watch X or Netflix movies in real time on your Xbox with your Xbox Live friends. That is one feature that is wild to me that existed like 10 years ago and just completely disappeared off the face of the earth. We have no equivalent, we have no answer to that really kind of, in my eyes, like a simple feature. And I've heard there's some, video codec issues and some kind of platform side things that make that impossible. But man, that was such a cool, unique feature, and I really miss it.
You'd have to think if they had the resources to devote, if they weren't launching a console in 2020, we would have seen that feature be kind of activated because that was all the rage once the pandemic hit. A lot of people would use browser-based extensions to do viewing parties and whatnot. And of course, the technology does exist. We did have it back on the 360 era, and I'm sure there were architecture reasons, but that would have been a wonderful feature to have in the past year or so. And I would imagine it was simply a matter of bandwidth within the teams to not have it. But that is a very good point, particularly as they want it to be a streamlined, consumer experience from person to person. And that really encapsulates what the original Xbox One's vision was to be one place where you could go for all your media. And if you could be, communicating with your friends, watching the same show, uh, in sync with one another, perhaps it would have been more useful. And there are ways around it. You can all just start Netflix and then have an Xbox Live party
Yeah, yeah.
separately. But merging the two certainly would have been a fun way to do things. And I wonder, Miles, if crossplay didn't actually reduce the need for that because people were playing on multiple boxes, and thus they were working more on getting their parties to interact with one another, seeing voice coding, seeing that it could be compatible on multiple platforms. I wonder if that didn't take away some of the energies. But that's a neat thing that I had not thought about in quite a long time. That's a neat feature that really I think would have been at home in 2020 had it been alive and working.
Yeah, that would have had a huge boom because it was just a silly little thing, and it's something that
Yeah.
at the time I took for granted. I remember having these like vivid like memories of viewing parties, watching just awful, just the worst possible horror movies that we could find on Netflix through this little feature. And then like I didn't, it's one of those things, I didn't really miss it until it was gone. And now every now and then I think about like, wow, that was really cool. That was a really innovative, unique feature for its time, and we haven't got a proper answer for it, at least on Xbox. Got to give a couple shout outs to some mods in the chat, some rad members in the chat: Hazador, Mr. Joanna Dark, Sergeant Rake, Synodex. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that like button, gamers. And we do have a super chat from Humdrum Dog 0211. Oh geez, okay. Gun to both heads. That's violent. Predict
Yeah.
Bethesda exclusivity. Wow, coming in aggressive. We can talk a little bit about a Bethesda exclusivity.
Mhm.
I'll kick it over to you first. What is your take on Xbox Bethesda exclusivity? Will Xbox board every single Bethesda game, or will they stick to their case by case kind of scenario?
Well, okay, so this answer for me changes every week, I feel, based on a little nugget of news, a little rumor here, a little piece of information there. And right now, gun to my head, I would say that we would, in large part, everything would be exclusive to Xbox platforms because now Xbox platforms, extend to PC, the console space, and xCloud. Kind of, those are three ways to get your content to a bunch of screens, and that's their goal is to see Xbox occur on as many screens as possible. Uh, some weeks I might be like, oh, I don't know. I want, Fallout 76 and Deathloop and a few others will continue their support. And we do see Microsoft continue to honor agreements on multiple platforms. They have no problem being a publisher on other platforms. But their biggest charge over the next 4 years is to bring people to Game Pass, bring people within the Xbox umbrella, and they don't care what platform you're doing that on, provided you're logging in and engaged on their service, spending dollars in their service. Sony and Nintendo both have an IP slate that brings people into their console space regardless. Switch continues to be the top seller uh, in nearly every market in the world, nearly every month that it's been alive. And part of that is now due to the fact that it's available. And Sony's IP is just unstoppable right now. They've done an incredible job. Microsoft's IP are 2 years away, most likely. We're going to see the majority of their heavy hitters really kick end of 2022 and beyond. So if there's anything in Bethesda's wheelhouse at the moment that they can make exclusive, there might be a draw to make it exclusive earlier than they might have previously wanted. And part of my logic also extends oddly into the E3 space, and that in whatever version of E3 existed and exists, and I think I went to the last Bethesda conference because I feel like they're done. I would imagine we no longer get Bethesda conferences that'll be rolled into an Xbox thing. So
Mhm.
if Bethesda felt confident enough year over year to have conferences, they must have something on the way. And Microsoft could easily fold that into their own stuff. There's a lot of legalities there, things that are well above my pay grade in terms of understanding and information that I'm privy to. But gun to my head, answer to the question, right now, I feel like the majority of their stuff will be exclusive to Xbox platforms, and they will manage some of those ongoing services in that case by case basis, as he said.
I agree with you in pretty much all aspects. The main reason that they acquired Bethesda, and they've been very public about this, is to bolster the value of Xbox Game Pass.
Mhm.
They are looking at models like Netflix and understanding that a consistent stream of like must play content is essential to the success of Xbox Game Pass. They've had some great growth, just hit 18 million subscribers recently. But you compare that to, let's look at Disney Plus, for example. And I know that's not an apples to apples comparison, but Disney Plus has been around for a very short period of time, and they just announced that they hit 95 million subscribers. So that is kind of the growth that Xbox wants to see from Xbox Game Pass, is they want this to be an undeniable service. And taking that suite of Bethesda games, they're going to leverage that in some way. And most of those I think will be exclusive. I think a lot of the big multi-platform, like their MMO suite, that those sort of games will be multi-platform because they want to keep the widespread appeal, keep the kind of player base thriving in that sense. But I think generally speaking, a lot of that stuff will be exclusive. And then with stuff like Indiana Jones, where there's more complicated legalities involved, they will, if it's not a flat out exclusive, they're going to make it so Xbox Game Pass is the best possible way to play that game, or the best possible value, or the best, experience to play Indiana Jones, because they could outright buy the exclusivity. They have the means, they have the finances to do so, but is it worth it to them? Or do they use that as a tool to say, okay, let's use Indiana Jones as a premier showcase of Xbox game studios moving forward. It'll be a multi-platform release, and that'll kind of build the notoriety of what we're doing with Xbox games. So yeah, totally agree. Most of that will be exclusive, not everything, but Xbox Game Pass will be the driver for everything from Bethesda.
So interesting to note, and you mentioned it briefly, that Game Pass is up to 18 million subscribers, which is 3 million up from something we heard 3 months before. And so they're adding at 1 million a month, approximating and accounting kind of mentally for the various deals that kind of come into play. They're bringing in long-term consumers with Game Pass. They're bringing in people that are going to be spending dollars month over month via subscription, and then by way of microtransactions, DLC, purchasing games at a discount before they leave. There's a lot of ways to keep people in your ecosystem. And for them to be adding so many Game Pass subscribers and keeping the conversion rates that they are, because they release something like 80% of them are ongoing. And then beyond that, selling out Xbox Series S and X consoles, just as PS5 is, for them to be doing that without a major exclusive is very telling, I think. And it really bodes well for the future once consoles exist in perpetuity and then are so available, because right now they are not, and they're selling off the charts. And that, I think, gives pause to the idea that any game should be rushed. And I know one of our topics will be, what AAA spaces will we see kind of in 2021. And if they're selling like hotcakes now and they don't have anything major, I think that means we'll see more development time for a lot of those things. And those Bethesda titles, back to the original question, may get to breathe a little bit more and go through a little more development time and not be pushed out the door to make a certain financial window, which sometimes does happen in any of the AAA spaces.
Exactly. At a certain point, people need to start recouping that money. And that's, we look at Sea of Thieves and the launch of that game. That game was in development for a really long time. And it got to the point where it just had to come out. Like we all know the launch date of Sea of Thieves was not the most fully fleshed out game. I still loved it. I played hundreds of hours of it, but it was pretty content light in a lot of ways. And that's just one of those situations where I think Xbox is going to kind of learn from a situation like that, where they said, okay, you guys have had 4 or 5 years on this. We need to get it out, and maybe we'll use this as a metric to drive Game Pass and drive like our games as a service platform and how we can grow that. Because you look at the state of that game now and it's incredible. But to your point, that's a situation where at the end of the day, like a certain point hits and it has to come out just to make investors happy. And stuff like that is unfortunate to hear, and it's boring to hear, but that's just the reality of running a business of that scale and giving a team millions and millions of dollars and years and years and years of time. At a certain point, you gotta be like, all right, we need to have something to show for this. And super chat hype from Mr. Joanna Dark. Hello, Miles and Luke. I would love to see more parity between clouds. I would love to see more parity between cloud saves between PC, console, and cloud on Game Pass titles. Many times you only get cross progression on console and cloud. That is a good point. I'm hoping that becomes the standard, because we have a lot of examples of other games. A lot of them are like, multiplayer, Fortnite, Smite, games like that that have cross progression, cross saves across all platforms. And I hope with Xbox's push to have a more unified ecosystem that becomes the standard. But you're right. Right now, it's kind of random as to what supports that, and it's mostly console.
Mhm. It's a good point, and it's funny because what's missing from the equation there, I think he's referencing, is PC. And I can tell you that if I booted up Halo Wars 2 and my data, not just progression, but my saves or whatever I had there didn't exist on PC, I would be disinclined to play on a PC platform versus console or in the cloud. And I would imagine that going forward, now that developers are aware of the need for it, and Microsoft is trying to have this streamlined, you can play, forgive the pun, but play anywhere, as it were. I think some of those features are going to be built in from the ground up on a better foundation to do just that. And I would hope they would, certainly. And that kind of an extended metaphor there. I think that's partly why we didn't see controller innovations, because they wanted it so easily transferable to mobile and to PC, and they didn't want you to have special tech to play on any particular device. But that's a good question and a good point from Mr. Joanna Dark.
Yeah, I guess that ties into our topic of kind of missing features. I mean,
Yeah.
I know the new development kit makes it a lot easier to have the unified approach across mobile, PC, and console. I'm
Mm-hmm.
hoping that moving forward, that is the standard, and then we'll start seeing more stuff retroactively kind of fitted to support that, because that is Xbox's approach right now. Is they're not really tied to, ironically, a box. Xbox
Mm-hmm.
is now more of a service and more of a platform, and they are going to where the people are playing. So that's why they're investing a lot in PC support. That's why they're investing a ton in mobile and xCloud, because they
Mm-hmm.
understand that the average person is not going to buy a console. The average person is going to do what's most convenient. And that's why services like Netflix and Disney Plus are huge, because they can watch it anywhere. They can watch it on their TV, they can watch it on their phone, they can watch it on their computer. And that is the service and the future that Xbox sees for their platform as well. And they're getting there. Console
Mm-hmm.
availability is going to be an ongoing issue. And from what I understand, they allocated a lot of the hardware that they had first kind of built to upgrading their server blades,
Mm-hmm.
because that's an ongoing issue for them right now. Is compared to services like Stadia, because they are using Xbox One hardware, their xCloud service is kind of lacking some features that Stadia has. Latency is more of
Mm-hmm.
an issue, load times are way more of an issue, and kind of resolution and performance are way more of an issue. um, 720p, I believe it's still for
Mm-hmm.
most things, which is kind of crazy. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Xbox understands the value of that, and I want to believe uh, that Xbox will embrace that as much as they've been touting that for years and years. I'm really hoping that this year going into next year is the start of their vision coming together of this
Mm-hmm.
unified platform.
Mm-hmm. I think you can be encouraged by early signs of that, and comforted, with your woes a little bit, in that a lot of the barriers that are stopping them from doing just what you're asking have to do with physical allocations of materials, of things, largely due to pandemic and production, and whatnot. Um, that to me suggests, to me, that's more promising than hearing perhaps that they were wavering in their confidence in a certain technology, or that they were investors that were getting cold feet, or maybe they were having a Stadia situation where they were supporting it, but they weren't really supporting it in the ways that they perhaps should have. For me to know that it's a genuine, just a matter of the physical materials that they can't get to production plants, tells me that that's an issue that can be solved over time and in better circumstances. And it's not a matter of wishy-washy people at the top that aren't supportive of the overall technology. I find that comforting, I guess, I suppose, in a world of, you know, bad news, worse news kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when I see the Xbox situation compared to the Google Stadia situation, at least I feel a little better about where Xbox is in that state.
Yeah, and to touch on that, I don't know if you saw the kind of statement that Matt Booty put out about kind of, I forget who it was. There was an outlet that put out an article basically, complaining about Amazon and Google being unable to understand the games industry and understand how to build a studio. And Matt
Mhm.
Booty put out a statement saying, yeah, like, I think Xbox is a great example of that, because you cannot just buy a studio. You cannot just take all the money in the world and make a successful studio. It's about finding the right people. It's about getting everyone on the same page. And it's about having a passionate group that wants to make games. You can't just throw a bunch of money at something and have it be successful. I thought that was some really great insight, and kind of chimes into the acquisitions and all the rumors regarding acquisitions, because you have people throwing around just wild ideas based on
Mhm.
nothing, based on, just it would be cool if this existed. And yes, there are a lot of acquisitions that would be cool, but I think for Xbox, it's more about finding the right fit for Xbox game studios. And they understand why Sony has been successful with their approach, and why PlayStation studios have become such a just universally recognized seal of quality. And that's
Mhm.
ultimately what they're trying to build towards. And they understand that they can't just buy people up and make that happen. And that's why they're, taking these carefully curated teams and kind of expanding the scope of what they're doing and building them up like Sony did with teams like Insomniac. Um, so yeah, for to your earlier point, Xbox does have a game issue, um, compared to Sony, but they are trying to correct that.
I had to cough. I'm sorry. I
Oh, it's
muted.
all good.
Did I
It's
get
all
it? Get it in time? All right.
good.
Oh man. All right. So yeah, very excited to see what Microsoft does going forward, not just in the AAA space, but in the technology space, how they plan to support so many of the groundwork they've laid going forward. And it'll be interesting to see just what they surprise us with over this next year and the year after, because in 2017, when they began their acquisition spree, I was surprised. Prior to that, I'd been surprised by backward compatibility. Since the backward compatibility and then the acquisitions, I continuously get surprised by different elements that they're adding to their services, adjustments. Game Pass Ultimate surprised me next, and then it was even more acquisitions, and then it was Bethesda and xCloud and the embedment of xCloud into Game Pass. They continuously impress with what they are doing, which, due to them being in third place, has been very consumer friendly. And my hope is that trend continues to be a strong value for gamers, that my dollar continues to be respected and my time continues to be respected. And all the things I don't know are really what would have me most excited about the brand and my investment in the ecosystem going forward.
Yeah, the competition in the games industry right now is pretty intense. And with that comes a lot of really great innovation.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, Xbox has been trailing behind. The launch of the Xbox One was infamously disastrous, and really genuinely set the brand back several years and really put them firmly at the bottom. Unfortunately, they've been doing a lot in recent years to correct that, and they've been on this great path to being what they call the best place to play. And as
Mhm.
someone who I play on everything, I have a Switch, PlayStation, PC. So I don't exclusively play on any platform, but I do want to see Xbox fully and truly deliver on their dream of being the best place to play. And I think their approach and their promises of the future of Xbox, if they deliver on those promises, they will be the best place to play. They are the most consumer friendly, despite their recent attempt to increase the price of Xbox Gold a little bit. That was a very against their recent kind of movement, which was strange. But generally speaking, Xbox has been the most pro-consumer place to play, and I don't see that going away. And I only see the value of Xbox Game Pass in particular increasing, especially as we start seeing, especially once games like Halo Infinite hit the service. Once we start
Mhm.
seeing the full power and scope of Xbox Game Studios, once the must-have games start hitting Xbox Game Pass, it
Mhm.
will be an undeniable value. There are critics who, rightfully so, can point to games and be like, that's whatever. It's
Mhm.
not a must play. And that is something that Xbox is missing right now, is they don't have a lot of must play. You have to play this game. And they're
Mhm.
trying to correct that. And I hope that becomes a reality for them.
I'm inclined to agree. And many of their their top tier games right now, like Sea of Thieves, are games that on the surface level, if you only put an hour or so in, you don't actually see what the brilliance behind the game is. You don't actually understand the loop and what it does for you. And as impressive as Sea of Thieves numbers are north of 11 million right now, and that's fantastic. And then opening that platform up to Steam really did a lot for that game as well. But it remains the question of good messaging. Is it there? Are you bringing people in? Are you showing them what your game truly is and the experiences that it can offer? And I don't know that there's a good answer definitively. And as my guest from last week's XEP said, Rihanna Manuel, she stated, you don't want a game that everybody likes. That would likely be a very uninteresting game. You want a game that appeals to certain types of audiences. And I applaud Xbox for supporting Sea of Thieves and State of Decay, Master Chief Collection, but they do need a new, fresh, must-have game that will draw in the Fortnite crowd, that will attract the people that are playing Call of Duty, the people that are interested in the experiences that they get on PlayStation, like God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn. And in order to do that, you need several games and you need several genres and you need top tier quality that, in theory, Perfect Dark will provide. In theory, Indiana Jones will provide. And, with all the hope that I can muster, Halo Infinite provides, because I'm ecstatic for Halo Infinite. I am so excited, Miles. I loved a lot of what I saw in that trailer back in July. Loved a lot of what we saw there with that gameplay demo. There were the rough edges, but I was really excited for it. But the majority of the memes around it and the jokes around it and the people talking about it, they weren't talking about how cool it looked, regardless of if they're going to have fun with it. It's a matter of perception and messaging, and you can go all the way back to the original Xbox One's launch. A lot of those features are pretty dope and exist now on multiple platforms. The always online stuff, some of the game sharing elements, a lot of those features are there, but it was so badly messaged. And if you can't get it out to the masses in a way that doesn't become negatively memeable, then you're in trouble. You've got to find a way to say it properly and get it to everybody in a way that they're going to be excited about. And that is a minefield of messaging of late. Particularly go back to your point about the price increase of Xbox Live, and then for it to be removed and responded to so quickly meant that there were detractors for that idea within the company that were saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And if they were able to so quickly course correct that, that means they've got, at the very least, a lot of people at the table that are not just saying yes to anybody. They're at least offering conflicting opinions. And I want that in a leadership group, no matter who it is. I want people that are not going to say yes for the sake of saying yes. And here's hoping that continues.
Yeah, there is a very good reason that was dropped quietly in a blog post on a Friday, is because they knew no one was going to be stoked about this news. No one was going to look at that and be like, sweet, Xbox Live Gold is increasing. I love this service. Xbox Live Gold is the best value in gaming. I'm all about paying more for it. No one was going to say that, and they knew that, and that's why it was so quiet. And to your point, it was crazy that that was turned around so quickly, and that meant that there was a leadership group within Xbox who knew that there was going to be backlash. And they were, they did not want to put this messaging out, but they used the backlash as a way to push against this increase. And thankfully for us, and thankfully for it primarily affected new players. But thankfully that they were able to kind of reverse that quickly and curb the negative appeal of that. Because as soon as we get into a position where, Xbox is the bad guy again, and they've been trying so hard not to be the bad guy, a lot of people are going to point to the Xbox One launch, where Xbox was forcing consumers to be excited about these features, forcing consumers to buy the Kinect and embrace the Kinect, when realistically, you need to get people on board just because of the value and the merits of the service. Once you start forcing people to do something, regardless of whether it's great or not, they're going to be against it. It's just human nature. You can't force somebody to sign up for something that they don't necessarily want or don't understand. And Xbox has done a great job correcting that. But the launch of the Xbox One really gave a lot of people trust issues with Xbox as a brand, unfortunately. And that will never go away for a lot of people. So there's a contingent of people waiting for Xbox to mess up in ways like that, so they can point to that and say, Xbox hasn't changed. everything that
Mhm.
Xbox is saying has been a lie. They're, as soon as they get, back up to a spot where they're, in the lead, they're gonna go back to their old ways. And that's kind of what that messaging felt like when they announced that they were increasing the price of gold, despite the fact that the audience has aggressively complained about gold and the value of gold as a service, and really the merits of gold existing at all. So for them to
Mhm.
announce a price increase, and then for them, if that stuck, that we would be in a situation where they announce a price increase, and then 1 week later they announce a record quarter of revenue for Xbox.
Mhm.
Can you imagine what that backlash would be if if that stayed? It would just be insane for that company to announce a price increase and then announce that they made more money than they ever made Xbox.
Mhm. And that would be an Activision level thing to fire 800 people and then talk about how great your sales were the week later. And uh, when you talk about the fans, the consumers that are waiting for Microsoft to mess up, I don't like the narrative of that, but I am glad it exists, at least because it keeps them honest and on their toes. And that might sound silly, but right now I think Nintendo gets away with far too much anti-consumer practice with some of the games they put into the vault, some of their neglect of an online infrastructure. And for all my thoughts on that, top selling system,
Hmm.
top selling games, evergreen title sales. Sony, a bit behind the times when it came to crossplay, not doing a great job in having a competing service with Game Pass. Despite my frustrations, one of the top selling systems, best IP slate available right now. Made the best game ever made, in my opinion, God of War. So these are all things that you look at, in isolation, you're frustrated with, you're pleased with, but how do they affect the mass market? That price increase to Xbox Live really and truly wouldn't have affected the majority of current users.
Hmm.
Most people probably wouldn't have been affected by that, but the narrative that gets spun would have been just such an unforced error. And it reminds me greatly of when Aaron Greenberg was speaking candidly about Halo Infinite. And I would say mistakenly hyped up Halo Infinite's reveal before perhaps it was ready. And that also felt like an unforced error because Microsoft's PR had been rolling and rocking since the Xbox Series X reveal at the Game Awards. Everybody was hyped. So much positivity, so much positivity. And then the Halo discussions, talking points came just after a previous kind of small mix up with an Inside Xbox Spotlight early pandemic, and then that demo itself, and it felt again unforced error. And I think Microsoft does a good job at learning from mistakes with PR, but then I don't think everybody's listening or at the same table. Sometimes the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. I think they're better at it than Sony and Nintendo in terms of delivery of messaging, but those unforced errors are the byproduct of wanting to speak a lot, whereas Nintendo and Sony tend to be very quiet on a lot of fronts. We didn't hear from Sony quite a bit during 2020, and we almost never hear from Nintendo until like the day before of something. And so wanting to communicate with your fans does open the door to a lot of that negative reaction and positive reaction for sure. But I'm glad they're under the gun, I suppose, because it keeps them honest in a lot of ways that we can never have another repeat of the 2013 Xbox. I never want to see that version of Microsoft exist again. I will leave as I did then. I was not part of that Xbox One purchasing group until the Xbox One S. I simply didn't buy in because it didn't feel like they honored my dollar. And I wonder if I'm in the minority of that or not. And only they have the metrics to show whether or not I'm speaking just for myself or for a wider audience.
That's a very interesting point. Like looking at the dynamic of PlayStation, Nintendo, and Xbox and how they interact with their audience and their fan group.
Mhm.
Xbox, hands down, is the most vocal and the most engaged with their audience.
Mhm.
And in a lot of ways, that's really great. And that means,
Mhm.
Xbox is actively listening to the feedback of its community. And we know companies like Nintendo aren't. Like you mentioned, Nintendo, as much as I love them, as much as I love a lot of the stuff that they put out, they get away, like you said, with a lot of anti-consumer practices. This whole
Mhm.
fiscal quarter ending kind of vaulting the Mario collection and
Mhm.
having these games that only exist until the end of the fiscal quarter. It's so transparently anti-consumer, and the average person is just like, oh, sweet, Mario. I have to buy Mario before March. Sweet, I'm going to do that. And
Hmm.
if Xbox attempted anything like that ever, they would be lambasted into oblivion. There would be
Hmm.
such a negative spin on that. Um, Whereas because PlayStation and Nintendo aren't as vocal and aren't as engaged, and frankly aren't trying to course correct a terrible
Hmm.
launch,
Hmm.
they get away with that. They can,
Hmm.
what was it? PlayStation came out and said that, the reason that they're not doing crossplay is because they're thinking of the children. What about the
Yeah.
children? That is the most BS PR garbage response that I've ever heard, and nobody really talked about it. It was just kind of whatever. And I saw people online defending that. I saw PlayStation players defending that spin that they were fed, that it is because of the kids. You got to keep the community safe. And no, 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 no. You can have a safe community and crossplay. That is not the reason. They just wanted to force you and your friends to buy a PlayStation. That is the reality. And whether
Sure.
you like PlayStation or not, that is what it was about, is making you buy a PlayStation. And if you want to play with your friends and you don't have a PlayStation, sorry, you got to buy a PlayStation. So I'm glad that they were kind of forced to backpedal that a bit and then embrace crossplay. But the fact that there was a contingent of people defending that sort of messaging was pretty wild to see, and that's not something that Xbox would ever get away with. And I'm glad, I'm happy that that's the case, because at the end of the day, these companies are just trying to make money. As much as I love
Hmm.
Xbox, I
Sure.
understand that they're just trying to make money, and they're just
Hmm.
trying to, profit off me. And as
Hmm.
long as I feel like they're respecting my investments and giving me money, giving me value for what I'm putting in, I don't mind. I get it. You're running a
Hmm.
company. You're making billions of dollars every quarter.
Hmm.
So I'm glad that there is some level of connection between the heads of Xbox and the audience. You never hear about the head of PlayStation jumping on Xbox Live and playing, or jumping on PlayStation and playing games with random people in the audience. But you
Right.
hear that about Phil Spencer all the time.
Mhm. And
And,
and we have an I'm sorry, I cut you off. I apologize.
oh no, 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 go ahead. I'm just gonna get into a super chat after your.
Okay, so before we get to our next super chat, I want to. There's a couple of things you touched on that really I like pointing out. First, we have to acknowledge that Sony did backpedal their crossplay, and now our gaming experiences are better for it. I play weekly with a group of friends in Call of Duty and in Fortnite across 3 different platforms. We play on older gen hardware from both Sony and Microsoft. One of us is on our PS5, one of us is on our Xbox Series X. Several of us are on Series X's, but the point is we're playing together, right? Something that couldn't have happened 2 years ago. So, however, whatever the reasoning, they did change and course correct there. Thank goodness, because the for the children argument is rather silly when you sell Grand Theft Auto on your platform, and that's just a reality there. And I'm fine with calling out that hypocrisy, but then also noting that as silly as that was, it's quickly forgotten in the wake of their updated policies. The other aspect that you touched on that I really like, and that I think a lot of people know but don't quite like acknowledging, is that we tend to evangelize these companies as our best friend and forget, in fact, that they are, vying for our dollar, and that our dollar does speak volumes. In particular, Phil Spencer is a wonderful example of this. I had the fortune to meet him at a fan fest, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. One of the nicest guys. Of course, he's shaking hands, saying hello at a fan fest, of course. But you're right; he is jumping online. He does feel very genuine when he's playing with people, when he's in various interviews. I feel we get very candid responses, and the Sony equivalent to that would probably be Shuhei Yoshida. I don't see many of the other executives on the Sony side doing that, but I have a feeling that I would enjoy a good conversation with Shuhei Yoshida. Um, all people I would love to interview for XEP for sure. Like these are guys that I just want to talk to. But at the end of the day, their job is to make people that spotlight brands like myself, like you, happy, gamers, consumers happy, and investors happy. And that's a difficult line to walk, but it's probably not difficult in principle when your goal is to sell software and investments into software. And if you're making good software that's fun for people to play, you get the best of both worlds. And I feel, which is a very pathos driven response, I feel like Microsoft is trying to do that. They are not my best friend. They will never be. I would love to interview all of them and hang out with them for sure, but they're not my best friends. What they are is vying for my dollar, but I feel like it's coming about in the right ways. It doesn't feel predatory. And for that exact reason, they get more of my money than anybody else seems to at the moment. And I think that I would love to be a fly on the wall for when they look at metrics and data and figure out whether or not people like me are talking out of their behinds or we're on to something with that idea, and I'm curious what the chat thinks about that as well. And so I'm watching them as they just kind of put their thoughts in there. And it's neat to see, Mr. Joanna Dark and another user and so many people talk about the different elements of where their value is, what they're trying to do with companies, what they as the consumer want. And so I appreciate all the responses that I'm seeing pop up there.
Yeah, that is a very interesting point because, yeah, like you mentioned, they don't want to be our best friends.
Hmm.
Xbox has done a better job, at least, you know, I facade is going to come across as, you know, slight-handed and kind of maybe mean, but they
Hmm.
at least are doing a better job of putting on the appearance that they want to be our friend. And
Right.
whether that's good or bad, you can kind of you decide for yourself. But at least I feel when I look at Xbox and I look at the leadership team that they are at least a little bit, at least given the impression that they're invested in the community and they're invested in making sure that they do deliver the best value and be the best place to play. And again, that's marketing buzz. That's how they can sell stuff to you, by using terms like that. So I understand that, but at least when I look at those big three, I can legitimately say that I feel like Xbox has the intentions of their player in mind more so than PlayStation and Nintendo. And again, whether
Hmm.
you agree or disagree, I think Xbox, from a messaging standpoint, has done a better job conveying that belief and kind of selling that ideal, if you will. Um,
It occurred to me while you're saying that it's easier to get mad at a friend and feel more betrayed
mhm.
by a friend than not. And I wonder if that's partly why we won't, why we would lambast Xbox, because they're our ecosystem. We do feel that kind of closer identity. We see their social media team engaging. We do feel like they'd be fun. And if they misstep, it feels, I think, a bit more hurtful than the corporation of Sony.
Exactly.
So
I
I wonder if
trusted
that's
you.
right. Exactly. I wonder if there's an element to that.
That's an interesting point. I think that really is a lot of it because we have these faces and these people who act like they want to be our friends, and then they do something that a friend wouldn't do. That a friend wouldn't ask me to pay more money. What's up? I thought
Hmm.
we were buds. What's going on here? I trusted you.
Hmm.
So yeah, that is an interesting point. I bet that does play a little bit into it because of how involved the Xbox leadership team is.
Hmm.
Um, Shout out to the almost 100 people hanging out with us today. I really appreciate that. If you're new to the channel, smash that like, subscribe. We're live every Saturday with cool people like Luke. Yeah, and I'm excited to see this little thing grow. We're fairly new, but it's been cool to see the rapid growth here. So super chat from Mr. Joanna Dark again, who's killing the super chat game, just running the show. With rumors of a spin-off Halo game in development, would you like to see a Halo game in the style of Mass Effect starring Fireteam Osiris? Interesting.
Yeah.
Luke, go ahead. What are your thoughts on a Mass Effect style Halo game?
I think the world of Halo is ripe for so many different types of storytelling, more than we've gotten. The Halo Wars games, if anyone has missed out on them, fantastic gameplay, really neat story that goes in there as well. I think Halo 4 with Spartan Ops wanted to do something more in terms of storytelling, and fell far short of what they wanted, but the idea was there. And that idea seems to be rekindled in Halo Infinite with creating a platform where we're going to get a Master Chief campaign, but it's also setting us up to have more stories with different fire teams or different characters therein. Halo 5 did a really bad job at discussing discussing Fireteam Osiris. I think they were really done an injustice and shortchanged by the character development we had with very cool characters, Locke and Buck being there with Tanaka and a few others, but really a lot of cool ideas that were just very poorly executed on because uh, it felt to me like it was made by committee. The mechanics in Halo 5, wonderful. I mean, even, ledge scrambling, really cool. The gunplay felt very good, but it felt soulless. And Fireteam Osiris really didn't get their time to shine, despite being in the game for roughly 80% of it. Blue Team was hardly there. As an avid reader of the books, I very much want to see more of these characters beyond Master Chief explored, but not at the expense of Master Chief's stories and gameplay. So if that means horror-based games where you're playing as Ferret Team or a few of the Marines ODST style, but really kind of under the gun fighting some enemies that you are just not equipped with Mjolnir armor to handle, I'm all for that. Seeing Fireteam Osiris explore a Mass Effect like world, being on a different part of an entire Halo ring, or portaled into a different world where they're trying to survive and explore Mass Effect style would be incredible. And there's an entire universe to explore within that world. The books do a wonderful job at not talking about Master Chief and giving us Halo stories. And I keep mentioning Ferret Team because there's this really cool mishmash Spec Ops team that you don't even discuss in the world of Halo games. And there's a lot of stories to be had there. As long as we see the Halo world expanded without doing it at the expense of Master Chief, the most recognizable character in Microsoft's slate of characters now, I'm absolutely all in on it. And they need to do that. We need to see Gears of War not be tactics, not be third-person shooter. We need to see Halo not be top-down strategy, not be first-person shooter, and not be traditional, as it were, if they want those franchises to survive. And everything, Miles, depends upon Halo Infinite. If it is not fantastic to masterpiece, I think Halo is going to be done for a good long while. And it was almost done this past time around. It's been a long break since Halo 5, and Halo Wars sort of kept people like me there, but it really feels like Halo Infinite is there to either make or break the franchise, because kids know Master Chief painfully as the guy from Fortnite. And I love him in Fortnite, but he is Master Chief from Halo, not guy from Fortnite. You know what I'm
I
saying?
can't wait for the contingent of people to be like, oh, they gave the guy from Fortnite his own game? What?
Oh goodness.
Because
There, you can't see it. There are statues and statues and walls of Master Chief and Halo lore based stuff, collector's editions, posters all over my room. But I'm well aware of how much depends, or how much rests on Halo Infinite's shoulders. And man, I don't want to be Joseph Staten, but I'm glad he's there.
yeah,
I took that in a lot of ways, Miles. Please,
no,
please
I
take
know, I
over.
appreciate that. And that's, you bring up some great points. Halo Infinite has to deliver. Xbox knows this. That is the reason that Halo Infinite got a 1-year delay. They cannot have another Halo 5. People forget that Halo 6 was supposed to come out within 2 years after the release of Halo 5. But because of how middling the response to the Halo 5 campaign was, they completely scrapped what Halo 6 was going to be. And they said, okay, we need to reevaluate how we're approaching this. We need to reinvest and kind of relaunch Halo. And that's why they got rid of the numbering. So Halo Infinite can be a jumping off point for people who've never played Halo. But yeah, Halo Infinite does need to deliver. It doesn't need to be, it needs to be more than a good game. Like Halo 5 wasn't bad. It was not a bad game, but compared to previous Halos and compared to, everything else out during that time, it was not a great game. The multiplayer suite was phenomenal, and I hope they take what they learned from the Halo 5 multiplayer suite and apply that to Halo Infinite. But the campaign and the story of Halo 5 was boring. It was really mediocre, and it was hard for anyone to play that game and get invested into the lore of Halo and the world of Halo. And that's a shame, because there's so much they can explore there. I am personally fine with Halo Infinite not being an RPG. I think it'll have some minor RPG mechanics, but as a longtime Halo fan, I want my core Halo games to be a core Halo game. But that being said, I would love like a third-person RPG, or to your point, a horror game within the Halo universe. Like taking
Mhm.
some of these other ideas, taking some of these other areas that don't revolve around Master Chief, but giving them a chance to kind of shine would really get a wider group of people invested. Because
Mhm.
not, first person single player campaigns are kind of an old school mentality, and
Mhm.
you're not going to appeal to a wide new audience with that. As great as stuff like Doom Eternal is and Wolfenstein is, like those games and that style does not appeal to a wide audience, and that's what Halo needs to be, and that's what Microsoft wants Halo to be. So
Mhm.
Halo Infinite, I hope, comes out and basically starts as the new foundation for the Halo world. They've
Mhm.
said that Halo Infinite will be the only core Halo game for a long time, but with the
Mhm.
rumors of spin-offs, yeah, go crazy. I want to see some other ways to experience Halo. I'm not a big RTS fan. I know Halo Wars is great to a lot of people. I
Mhm.
personally don't want to play an RTS, but I want to see other avenues of Halo explored.
Well, I mean, those are niche. You're right. Those are niche genres. I mean, Gears Tactics is another good example of that. That game is nearly immaculate. It is wonderful, but it's not appealing to a wide audience. And Halo is ripe for, as I mentioned, those horror elements. But like, I can imagine a third-person Halo shooter that doesn't feel like Gears of War, where everything's very heavy and Vietnam-inspired weaponry, but it's still that Halo arcadey, quick gunplay feel, but you're on a battlefield with hundreds of other soldiers. We've never seen those big Halo scale battles that sometimes happen that you might have seen in Reach, when you have that moment where you fly over and you see all the warthogs traveling to the big combat zone. We've never been a part of that combat zone as a soldier. You can also imagine that Muso games where you're a Spartan, not Master Chief, but a Spartan dropped on a planet and you got to take out hundreds of Covenant, and you're playing it Dynasty Warrior style. I can imagine, RPG level mechanics where you're dropping in onto a planet and you need to upgrade and fix and adjust your armor in order to survive in a world. There's a lot of ways to explore the world and the options. I mean, Oni in and of itself is Spec Ops. How many Spec Ops stories could you play through where you're having really cool experimental tech? Maybe you're just a standard soldier or a spy playing through. A lot of the books involve stealth action and cutting deals, almost Hitman style, in terms of just what the characters are doing. There's a lot of ways to explore that world. It is as ripe as Star Wars in terms of opportunity, but like Star Wars, not all the games capitalize on it, and it feels very dry run in a lot of ways for those games.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, there's a lot of potential for Halo to grow and expand, and I hope it gets the chance to do so. Obviously,
Mhm.
all the eggs are in the Halo basket right now when it comes to
Mhm.
making sure, or all the eggs are in the Halo Infinite basket right now when it comes to making sure that that is the premier Halo experience. That gets Halo back to the glory days of Halo 1 and 2, where you could not deny how fun Halo was, and you could not deny how important of a release Halo 1 and 2 were for their time. That is obviously the era that they're trying to get back to, and I'm glad to see that they are, giving the team the time to do so. And I hope 343 delivers, because, there's a contingent of people who have not been stoked with 343 Industries and what they've offered with Halo. I haven't been that harsh on them. I thought Halo 4 was pretty great overall. Again, I love the multiplayer suite of Halo 5. But yeah, Halo Infinite needs to be better than both of those, for sure.
The people mad at 343 are the same people that act like Disney ruined Star Wars, as if George Lucas didn't make the prequels. And that's, I think, a really silly approach to something. 343 took over a massive franchise, delivered a fantastic campaign in Halo 4, a fantastic multiplayer suite in Halo 5. 343 is not the devil of gaming. They haven't shut down a bajillion studios and fired people, week over week. Like, the animosity they feel are people, I think, that are either bandwagoning or just clinging to the past. And that's not a fair thing to hold a studio to. That's not how the world or games or entertainment works. Those old games made by Bungie still exist. You can go play them, just as you can go watch the old Star Wars movies or anything else. But not giving a team a fair shake simply because of the name, I think is disingenuous, and you miss out on a lot of great experiences. I know that in my younger years, I'm sure I missed out on a number of experiences, the same as any of us would miss, Miles, if we only played PlayStation, only played Xbox, only played Nintendo. How many great games or great experiences do we miss by just saying, "Oh, I don't like that studio"? Silly. It's a
Exactly. Yeah.
silly endeavor, you
Look
know?
at the project itself, and not,
Right.
who's making it. You can
Right.
have your reservations for sure, but I always try to give studios and give developers the benefit of the doubt when they put out something new. I try to take it at what it is, and then kind of form my own opinions from there. I don't have to You don't have to love it,
Mhm.
but you also shouldn't completely write it off because it's not Bungie, which is what a
Mhm.
lot of people have done. You have those people who say Halo died with Bungie, and it's the same thing with a lot of like music and bands. You have those people, like, when a band member leaves or the lead singer leaves or changes, you have that hardcore audience who's like, they're dead to me. I'll never listen to them again. And that's kind of
Mhm.
what the Halo audience is down to 343, which is kind of sad.
Mhm.
Um Shout out to some peeps in chat. Gunstar, I see you in there. How you doing? Sergeant Rake, Obviously, Mr. Joanna Dark holding it down. Valorian, King Arthur. There was someone else in here who said that they tuned in because of the Rand episode and really liked the show. So that's awesome to hear. I'm glad I can start stealing some of the Rand al Thor audience. But yeah, so I guess we can kind of segue into some backwards compatibility rumors that have been swirling around. Because as we all know, news is slow. It's rumor season. But we've gotten some actual official comments from people within Xbox regarding backwards compatibility. The beard himself, Jason Ronald, did a little tease on Major Nelson's podcast about backwards compatibility announcements coming very soon. And there was also a Spanish YouTuber who got himself into some trouble for basically saying that next week Xbox was going to reveal some backwards compatibility news and had to kind of delete some tweets and damage control a little bit. So I wanted to pick your brain on, first, what you hope the backwards compatibility news is. It can be wild if you want it to be, Luke. And then second, what you realistically think this backwards compatibility news will be.
Oh man, that's a lot, and so I'm going to stall for time by saying how much I really appreciate the efforts that they've gone to with backward compatibility, and I mean that wholeheartedly. Not just the ability to play games of yore on my Xbox Series S and X or my Xbox One, but the idea that a lot of them are now free mastered. I mean, they've been up-res, system hardware level. They've been enhanced for Xbox One X, of course, Xbox Series X, made to work well in 4K. There's a lot that comes with a lot of those backward compatibility experiences that is to be applauded and at no cost to the user. So I really appreciate that. I love that I can go in and play some of those older games. And when I think about the joy that I get, because I don't play Xbox Series X games or Xbox One games, I just play games on my Xbox, and I don't look at which system it was made for. When the deals with gold sales come out this week, I'm like, oh, do I want to play that? Is that there? Can I have that experience? And I do. And oftentimes I'm getting a far better experience that I would have had if I'd bought it back when it came out in 2008 or 13 or whatnot. So I'm appreciative of that program. I do not know what these rumors are alluding to. I understand they were deleted tweets. I understand there are people who perhaps know more than I do. I do not have inside sources. But the one thing I've wanted from backward compatibility since the program was announced was the ability to simply put a disc that I own in and it work. And that doesn't work 100% of the time because of the processing that it goes through for legality purposes. And that bums me out. There's a lot of licensed content that are specific to the old Spider-Man games or the old Star Wars games in some cases, or just older licensed products that I don't get to play even if I own the disc. And I want that to be course corrected. There's a Star Trek game called Star Trek Legacy that nobody likes except for me and a few other Trek nerds. But I really want to be able to play that again on my Series X. I don't want to have to hook up my 360. So my hope is that it's something to the level of, if you've got the disc, it will fully emulate it. There's no need for licensing work on some of these now, because we're going to fully emulate a 360 or an OG Xbox. But in some way, shape, or form, I want them to be able to fill the gaps of the old back and path. I've never played Obi-Wan, Star Wars Obi-Wan back in the day. I'm sure it's terrible now. But I want to play some of those old games. So my hope is that it's something like that. However, I feel like that announcement would be coupled with other things that feels too big for maybe what we're talking about here. So I don't know the answer to your question, but I'm watching chat and I'm curious, what are other people wanting from Back and Pat? Because that's such a good program. I love that program, and I'm curious what else is on offer.
Yeah, it's really cool to see these Xbox One X enhanced games. Like Sekiro was a prime example. When I played that on Xbox One X, it ran pretty well. The frame rate was unlocked, so it wasn't really 60. I kind of fell off. When I got my Series X, that was one of the first games that I reinstalled and played and absolutely loved it. The load times were incredible. It was a locked 60 FPS, and I got to kind of re-experience this game that I had fell off with in like almost a completely new way. And I didn't have to buy anything extra. I didn't have to buy a remaster. Just booting it up and playing it, it was just a better experience. And I've been doing that with a ton of games. I'm a big Souls guy, so I've just been going down the Souls rabbit hole. Played Sekiro, loved it because of the enhancements, and I was like, oh, you know what? I have Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 on here as well. So I started going down the list of all the Dark Souls games again. So I love that with Xbox now, we can just play the games that we want to play, and we don't have to have, this worry of, oh, it's an Xbox 360 game. Let me boot up my 360. I remember when the Xbox One came out, and I bought that at launch. It was like me and a couple friends, and then we had a group of friends playing on 360, and you
Mhm.
could not cross party. So we would have to like go jump on our 360s and play stuff separately on our 360. And it was really
Mhm.
cool. It's really cool now to have this just synergy. So I can hit up my friends on Xbox One, we can jump in a party together, and we can play games together. And it's that simple. And backwards compatibility and the focus from Xbox on that has been incredible. So yeah, I definitely want to hear what the audience, what the chat thinks about that, what they're hoping to see. Um, I'll just say
Y-
I know what it is, so I'm not going to comment on it. But yeah,
Okay, so then I have a question then, not for you, but one that I will put into the ether, because there's been no better steward of legacy in recent years than Microsoft. I thought it was going to be Nintendo back when they had the virtual console on the Wii. I thought that they were going to really guide the legacy of games that existed on their platforms. I thought that PlayStation might have done it because the PS2 and the PS3 both incorporated backward compatibility with discs back in the day, and they kind of fell wayward as well. And it's probably got to do with the fact that you simply make more money when you resell a game. I get it. But when you remove the ability to buy the game altogether, I can't imagine that's overly profitable as well. So Microsoft's done a great job at allowing their legacy to extend by way of the back compat program. And I know you know it, and you've not told me anything. I'm curious if it's something as grand as what I'm talking about with this big emulation push that I want, where we can play all the old licensed stuff, or as simple as, hey, we're back. The back compat team is back to work, bringing titles in at a regular cadence, the way we were. And both would excite me. To be very clear, both would excite me because I want to play as many games as possible, and I want people that love the legacy of games to be on one platform, one place. And gamers deserve that. And I think that, you know, having a program where you can go back to play those games you missed from your childhood, those games that I always saw on the shelf for the OG Xbox because I didn't own an OG Xbox. Do I get to go back and try them at least? The Game Passes let me try a lot of them. Games of Golds let me try a lot of them. Uh, but there's a finite number that are available. And if that number keeps expanding until we've got 99.9% of them, save like the Kinect games that you can't play without specific hardware, then I'm down with it. I think that's dope. I think that's awesome.
let's
Uh,
go. That's the future I want to live in, because there are
and
a contingent of classics from OG Xbox and Xbox 360 that are not in the program. Mr.
mhm.
Joanna Dark, a man of extreme taste, mentions Otogi Myth of Demons, which is one of the most criminally overlooked Xbox or OG Xbox exclusives. Developed by From Software, an amazing action kind of hack and slash platformer. No one played it because it was this obscure. From Software didn't have a reputation at that point. It was an Xbox exclusive. So Otogi and Otogi 2 just went completely under the radar. But those are Xbox exclusives that are not available unless you own an original Xbox. And I still do, and I still have the discs, and I could, in theory, hook it up and play it, but realistically, I'm too lazy to do that, and I would rather just have the option to play it on my console. But
Yeah.
yeah, I want to see
And
that push continue
I've
to.
never I've never heard of that, Miles. I've never even heard of that game. And if you've got your OG Xbox, does it even have HDMI? Will it even hook into your monitor right now?
No.
And that you have to go to so many links to play it. But for someone like me who's hearing you say that, I'm like, oh, I want to try a From Software game from back then. That's hack and slash. That sounds dope. And if I have the ability to access it, and then it dropped into something like Game Pass or Games with Gold, or some way of delivering that, how many more people will get to have that memory and experience that you're talking about? And then what opportunities are available for people to say, oh, well, we really like the ideas here. Could we get a sequel? Could we get, an upres, a remaster, a remake, whatever that means? Franchises can live and die by that program simply for by way of being accessible. And that's the thing I'm trying to get at is you're telling me about this game that I should have played, want to play now, but I can't. And that's
Yeah,
not that's kind of a bummer.
it's a bummer. It's a, especially with it being an Xbox exclusive. I understand licensing is really the biggest hurdle for a lot of these games. And to your point about the discs,
Mhm.
Right now, from my understanding of how Xbox's backwards compatibility program works, is it's not hardware based. So unfortunately, I don't know that Xbox will ever be able to get to a point where they can have any disc work. From what I understand, when you're putting in the disc, you're basically getting access to the digital file download, and the
Mhm.
disc is serving as like a licensing access point to play that. But the game
Right.
itself is still, the disc is essentially just a key to unlock
Right.
that. So
Mhm.
unfortunately, and not to crush your hopes and dreams, but I don't think that'll be the disc future you're hoping for. I don't think that'll ever come because of the way that their emulation system was built. It's all software based and not hardware based. So as I
Yeah.
have a massive collection of original 360 and original Xbox game discs, and I want that to be the case. But I don't. It's gonna happen, Luke. I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think we're getting there.
Look, man, I'm getting a lot of things I never thought I would get in terms of entertainment across multiple platforms. There's a lot of different Batmen being out there. There's more Supermen being made. I'm getting new games, new characters. We're seeing all types of revival. I might get 3 Spider-Men in the same movie, in the coming years. Never say never, man. Never say
That's
never.
right. That's the attitude to keep, because anything's possible, as we've seen and as we've learned. If enough
Mhm.
people are loud enough, we can make it happen. That's why I've been harassing, Xbox pretty much on a weekly basis about Phantom Dust, because that
Mm,
that needs to come back. And that's actually another fascinating story of backwards compatibility. I don't know if
mhm.
the audience or you're familiar with how Phantom Dust, the remaster, was made.
I'm not.
So Code Mystics is this really talented team of code nerds, and the original source code for Phantom Dust doesn't exist. Gone, lost.
Ah,
So what they were able to do is basically get the Xbox disc, the original Xbox disc, download all the assets, download the source code from the disc itself, and basically
mhm,
decrypt and decode it to the point where they could go into this disc, like the physical disc, and emulate the files to remaster it, to make it 4K, to make it native 4K, and then to actually go in and change like gameplay mechanics within that based off just the original Xbox disc, which is wild. So that was a
Yeah.
really cool story in backwards compatibility, and that's how they were able to basically reintroduce Phantom Dust, the base experience, to a new audience, and that
Mhm,
is with online support, with stuff that didn't exist previously.
mhm,
So that was actually the first time I had ever experienced Phantom Dust. I wasn't like an OG Phantom Dust fan. I just saw this
mhm,
obscure Phantom Dust trailer from E3 years ago, got fascinated in this idea of what it was, started watching old YouTube videos of this obscure OG Xbox game. And then when that remaster hit, I dove into it and I ended up absolutely loving it. Like, if you go and play Phantom Dust, if you haven't, there's still nothing like it. It's this really unique kind of arena based, card based brawler. And it delivers a really cool fusion of Magic the Gathering meets like Dragon Ball Z, which is
mhm.
something that, especially for its time, was wild. And even to this day, there's nothing really like it. So that is one of the coolest examples of reintroducing this old game to a new audience in a really cool way.
Mhm. Well, man, certainly all the hype that we built, at least on my end, for whatever it is Jason Ronald might have been referencing, and whatever we're going to find out, is probably not fair to them. But as I go back to, never say never, because there are so many things that they can do to honor the legacy of games. And I'm so anxious to find out, one, what this is, and two, if this means that down the line we get more back compat type news going forward. Because man, I just want to play games, and I don't care what era, what system, uh, where they're from. I just want to play more experiences and enjoy the medium that we all have.
Exactly. Yes. I
Mhm,
mean, because we're in this world where Xbox is trying to be basically PC. Like the gap
mhm.
between a
Yeah,
console and a PC at this point is about this big. There's not a huge difference. I mean, obviously you can do more on a PC. You have more
sure.
options, you have more flexibility. But the biggest issue right now when you compare the two is on PC, I can go and play all these old games that I own and I have more control over my options for resolution, for frame rate, so I can experience these old games at least with higher frame rate. And that's the biggest thing with when we're introduced to this new generation is pretty much everything 60 FPS or above now. So that has kind of become for me like the biggest hurdle of going back and playing games is like you boot it up and you're like, oh, it's locked to 30 FPS.
Mhm.
Dark Souls 3 right now is 900p 30 FPS max on Xbox. On my Xbox Series X, I'm playing Dark Souls 3 at 900p 30 FPS, and that is disgusting. It's just like because Dark Souls 1 and 2 both got remasters, so they're at least 1080p 60, and it's
Mhm.
so jarring going from one of those to Dark Souls 3. So I really hope that Xbox really starts delivering on their commitment to booting up these old games and just having them look and run better. And I
Mhm.
understand From Software especially is notoriously terrible about post game support and updates. So
Mhm.
if Xbox can do it and they don't have to, there's a much better shot that Dark Souls 3 will get updated by Xbox than it'll get updated by From Software. So
Mhm.
hopefully that becomes the reality.
Yep. Here's hoping, man.
So diving in a little bit more into, I guess, Xbox Game Studios, another big topic of our Xbox of our show today,
Sure.
is what is the slate of Xbox Game Studios going forward? We know about titles like Halo Infinite, we know about Fable, we know about Perfect Dark, we know about State of Decay 3, um, but we don't really know what the immediate future of any of those projects looks like. I think Halo Infinite is probably the start of when we'll start to see their big launches come out. Psychonauts 2 will be out sometime in the next 6 months, I imagine. We still don't have an official release date, but that's probably the next Xbox Game Studios title that we'll see. But outside of that and Halo Infinite, we don't really know what the window for any of these games are, and a lot of them are probably years out. So, what I want to know from you is what do you expect in terms of the studios that we haven't really heard about? Studios like Compulsion Games, for example. What do you think they're working on, and what do you think the window for their next release is?
Oh man, that is the magic question. I very hastily, when you brought this up, and I waited to do it until you mentioned Xbox Game Studios because I had a rough idea of what we would talk about. I listed every first party game off the top of my head that I could think of on the spot in that moment without having thought about it. State of Decay, Fable, Psychonauts, Halo Infinite, Everwild, Forza, Perfect Dark, and I'm done. And that's what I could think of as far as new stuff that I know about, right? That's just the top of my head gut reaction without taking a moment to think it over beyond that. And that I think is indicative of something when I say I host an Xbox show, that's my first gut reaction is it that I'm pretty much out of quick thoughts on that. There are more, some of them we know about. Uh, we've got games that are ongoing from Obsidian, from In Exile. But as far as what some of these studios are working on, simply put, I don't know. And I don't know when these games are happening. Uh, Jeff Grubb, I was talking to him a couple weeks ago, months ago, and he, he made his verbal faux pas about mentioning Forza Horizon 5 coming out sooner, and then the entire internet was like, "All right, it's happening." We have no knowledge of that being
No,
firsthand. It
that's
was a
not official
guesstimate.
at all. Yeah. Yeah.
He was just like, "Oh, maybe, I guess," because we know they're going to make Forza games. We know that Everwild is in production at Rare. We know Psychonauts is being made for multiple platforms, but we don't really know timelines. The only thing we have confirmed, to the best of my knowledge and memory, is Halo Infinite for this year. And the Bethesda deal, the fact that systems are selling despite first party hardware coming on a big scale, suggested that maybe they don't rush some things as much as they do. I hate that I don't have a good answer for you, but I don't have a good answer for you. What are they making for this year and beyond? We just don't know much. And if I were them, mum's the word until you see the smallest trickle down of buying rates on your consoles. Once it slows down just a little bit, then you say, all right, guys, this is what's coming up. This is what we're looking at, because there's no need to push it right now. Take a page from Sony's book, perhaps. Quiet down. I don't necessarily want that. I'm just saying, what's the right move for them? we don't know, and in large part, we're probably not going to know for a little while. I think. What do
Yeah,
you think?
it's honestly kind of nice that there haven't been a ton of massive exclusives on PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X right now, because nobody can get them even if you want them. Like I
Yeah.
am grateful that I have a Series X and a PS5 right now. I had to
Hmm.
battle to get both. The Series X was a little bit easier, but the PlayStation 5 took me a hot minute. But it's kind of nice that there isn't a lot that's making you have to get these consoles to play these games, because it's sounding like June is going to be the next like somewhat refresh where it'll be somewhat available. And even still, I think the demand will be so high at that point that it'll be gone really quick as well. So that's why we see like Sony pushed Ratchet and Clank to June. They pushed that to June strategically because they'll have more availability. They don't want one of their flagship games to come out and only have a maximum potential of selling 4 million copies,
Hmm.
because that's just the reality. You PlayStation's install base is massive. And when you put out an exclusive only game, not only is it exclusive to PlayStation platform, but it's exclusive to PlayStation 5, which no one can get. That's going to damage sales. Like long
Hmm.
term, they'll be able to recoup that, but they don't want to put themselves in a situation where it comes out and can only have a limited sale potential.
Hmm. And
Um,
I'm seeing people in chat mention games like The Gunk and Stalker 2 and Scorn, and those I'm very excited for those games, all for different reasons, and they all kind of hit a different tier of game, kind of like the medium. The medium was and is a really good AA game. Like
mhm.
that's really what it was meant to be. It was never meant to stand side by side against some of the bigger AAA titles. Uh, and I'm all for those third party games filling the gap of exclusivity for as long as the deals are in place. But when we're talking about first party stuff from single A up to triple A, we just don't have a lot of information. And really and truly, uh, if I'm Microsoft, I don't let my first party slate push out unfinished products or uh, anything that furthers the idea of a Game Pass game, because I love
Ye-
Game Pass games. Those are my bread. I will swim in sevens all day
mm, mm,
long.
mm.
Miles, I love it. Yo,
Give me
if that's the
Crackdown
game
3,
that's
baby. Let's go.
I love Crackdown 3, but I'm well aware of what it's not. I bought in knowing what I was getting, right? But I'm in the minority of the informed consumer who's like, yeah, it's more Crackdown. I get it. How many people would have theoretically, pardon me, seen the Crackdown 3 box if we saw boxes anymore and been like, yes, the next best version of Crackdown? Very disappointing for that consumer that thinks it's what it's not, right? Saw the false marketing and whatnot.
Yeah, saw Terry
And
Crews and like, oh, they're going all out. This is going to be a big game. I'm hyped.
right?
Let's go.
Exactly, exactly. They need to combat that narrative as much as possible. Now that they've got the money and the studios, and I would argue the time, uh, no more Sea of Thieves launches, no more State of Decay 2 launches. I love State of Decay 2. The Juggernaut Edition is where all of you should be putting your attention, but it's very different than when it launched. And we can't have any more games that launch and you're like, oh, it's a Microsoft Game Pass game. No, you want bangers. You want bangers at the single A, double A, and triple A level. Sure, I'll grant you that all day. But I don't want a first party game to come out and be unfinished, broken, uh, lackluster in any way, shape, or form. I don't need triple A every time, but I do need respectable launches that are not disingenuous for fans.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And I want to feel that Xbox has learned from those lessons. There was the meme going around where every single Xbox first party game that was released had a 69% average on Metacritic. So we had Crackdown
Mm-hmm.
3, we had Sea of Thieves, we had State of Decay 2, all hovering about
Mm-hmm.
69, which great for memes, but not great for selling the idea of your platform and its portfolio of first party games. So to
And
your sorry, go ahead.
well, and two of the three of those got ongoing support and are now far better games than when they launched.
Hmm.
I
Yes.
love that. I appreciate that. That doesn't sell systems.
No, you can't, because you know, unfortunately, like I loved Sea of Thieves at launch. I had fun with State of Decay 2 at launch, but you're losing the narrative when you launch a
Mm-hmm.
game in that state. There
Right.
will be a group of people like the Xbox One launch that no matter how great the game becomes, because of how it launched, they will never reconsider it. They will
Right.
never look past what the launch was. And because of that, the reputation of that game is permanently damaged. And that sucks. For Sea of Thieves in particular, it gets a really bad rep because of its launch. And they'll never, for some people, they'll never overcome that. And there will be a group of people who will never play it because of that launch. And I really hope that Xbox sees that and has learned from that. But it's hard to say. I mean, again, it comes down to they're going to be really hyper focused on making sure the slate of games coming to Game Pass is consistent. So we might see these more games as a service titles like Minecraft Dungeons come out, where it drops, it gets decent reception, but there's not a lot of content to it, and they kind of slowly add. I think that might, unfortunately, for some people, be the strategy with some of the releases for Game Pass, but those will mostly be single and double A.
Yeah, I agree.
Super chat hype from True Gamer. Care to extrapolate? Ooh, nice word. Upon what Jez was saying about Xbox crazy ambitious plans behind the scenes, Miles. I guess I'll need some more context. Xbox's plans right now, I can tell you, are very much focused on Xbox Game Pass and making sure that Xbox Game Pass is successful and continues to be the best deal in gaming. So I don't know specifically what Jez was referencing. It could be a number of things from what I've been hearing, but I think people are going to be really happy with a lot of the Xbox partnerships and a lot of the Xbox kind of first party news that comes out this year. That's really all I can will say, I guess.
Well, Miles, because I don't have those sources, and I'm not sure exactly what Jez was alluding to. Maybe the spirit of his question, it refers to the idea of, we've seen consistently in the rumor mill people say things to the equivalent of Microsoft's not done. Microsoft's still trying to do this, do that, in terms of acquisitions, in terms of properties that would purchase up to be exclusive for themselves. I mean, I think the Indiana Jones game certainly sparked a lot of conversations about, okay, well, is this going to be one of the exclusive ones? Is this going to be some huge project? What kind of game is it going to be? In the last few weeks, I get a lot of questions written into XEP that revolve around, is Microsoft planning to buy Ubisoft? Are they planning to buy Square Enix? Are they planning to buy a franchise, as it were? Maybe not the studios involved, but do they want the IP of, I'm pulling this out of the air, but like, are they going to buy the Final Fantasy IP? Obviously, that's not the case, but something akin to that. Do you think maybe that's what people like True Gamer are trying to get at or hoping for in terms of their news? Do they want something as big as buying Ubisoft or Square Enix? And is that even good for the industry?
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of the diehard or hardcore Xbox fans want, is they want Xbox to basically take something away from PlayStation fans. And I don't mean that's, the general consensus, but there are people who are very committed to Xbox, and they want Xbox to flex in a way that makes it so PlayStation gamers suffer a little bit or squirm a little bit. And I don't know that that's what True Gamer wants, and I don't know if that's necessarily what he was referencing when Jez is talking about ambitious plans. But yes, generally speaking, Xbox does have some pretty ambitious plans. And most of those plans revolve around Xbox Game Pass and acquisitions for Xbox Game Pass and Xbox Game Studios. So it's no secret that they're going to buy more. Anyone can say that and be right. Anyone can say Xbox will buy more studios or Xbox will buy more publishers. And it's rumor season, so that kind of stuff is running rampant. I don't think it's going to be EA, and I don't think it's going to be Ubisoft. I think there's a legitimate possibility Uplay comes to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate in the same way that EA does, but the logistics and the complications of acquiring a Ubisoft and an EA are probably not worth it for Xbox, because as we've heard from Matt Booty, they want the right teams. Obviously Bethesda was huge, and that was probably very complicated as well. but Ubisoft and EA are massive, 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 massive companies with thousands and thousands of employees. And to try to get them all in your ecosystem and be under the same vision and kind of fulfill that dream of having passionate teams making the right projects is
Mhm.
probably more of an undertaking than Xbox wants in. Whereas they can look to key strategic partners like Ubisoft and EA and then focus on nurturing and catering smaller publishers and studios.
I tend to agree with a lot of that logic, particularly because of the legal backflips you would have to do to acquire somebody that's going to be making Star Wars games. Acquiring EA or Ubisoft, they're making Star Wars games, which means you have to clear things with LucasArts and Disney, and you have to go through these different amount of rights issues. And as you said, Bethesda was a massive undertaking. For goodness sakes, they had to do certain political allegiances to say that, okay, Deathloop's still going to come out on PlayStation. We're still going to honor this deal, honor that deal. And there's just a lot of work that would go into acquiring it to bring it under a Microsoft umbrella. And I think the gaming industry is better to have a strong third party slate of studios like Activision, Ubisoft, EA. Because as much as we vilify them, they do bring a lot to the table that force first party to compete with and indie games to compete with. Uh, in many ways, I think that's a good thing. I do like the idea, though, Miles, of seeing something similar to what happened with EA Play, where if you're under the Game Pass Ultimate umbrella, you get those 10-hour experiences. You get to play the things that are in the vault. You get some of those perks that happen. Sony right now does a great job at rewarding PlayStation Plus subscribers with perks in games that I think are more relevant than Microsoft does with its Game Pass perks. Uh, but the idea that they're out there trying to fill that catalog, entice people in, and they're doing a decent job in the moment with a really good job happening down the line, like in future, and still growing subscribers bodes well for whatever it is they're going to do, whatever they're trying to do. Uh, Again, no secret they're going to bring in more studios. That's great. I'm curious about the IP involved in that. What would they do if they purchased a certain studio? Does that studio's IP come with them? I mean, right now, Embracer Group is gobbling up things that I would have loved to see Microsoft take a head on. Selfishly, I love the Darksiders franchise, but it really could have benefited from some bigger umph of Microsoft's wanting to put them in a spotlight, maybe upping the tier a bit, as it were. What will we see happen in that space? And I think that's what a lot of gamers are really asking when they see this question, or when we see this question on our various shows and platforms. And I think you're right. A lot of times gamers want to take away something from the other ecosystem, and that comes from wanting to see your dollar respected and valued for the ecosystem you invested in. And I'm with you on that. I get where that's coming from, but for certain things, I don't want Star Wars to be exclusive anywhere. I don't want Spider-Man to be exclusive. I hate that. I don't want Arkham or Batman to be exclusive to Xbox. I really don't. I want some certain properties I think should be in as many places as possible. So I'm really curious where this line of thinking goes down the line and in future when you want everything under one umbrella. And I thank True Gamer for the question because it gave us so many other jumping off points for topics.
Exactly, yeah. Like we talked about, there are certain franchises where it's a little bit mean spirited if you just make
Mhm.
it an exclusive. At
Right.
the end of the day, if you're like the Spider-Man Avengers thing, I thought was just really gross. But I
Hmm.
understand that, Spider-Man on PlayStation, Sony has some legal rights to movie franchises. Um,
Right.
but they don't own the property as a whole. Sony does
Hmm.
not own Spider-Man, but Spider-Man games are exclusive, and then the whole Spider-Man on Avengers thing, that was just kind of really scummy to me that you would, especially with a game that launched content light and launched in the state that it did, to have exclusive content like that, I thought was
Yeah.
just really unfortunate. And as much as I love Xbox, like I'm not in the camp where I want people to not have access to games or have certain things that they're
Right.
accustomed to taken away. You know,
Yeah.
there are vocal people online that are kind of ugly and aggressive about it. And I think that's where
Mhm.
a lot of that comes from, the tit for tat. I'm like, oh, well, they're taking this from me, so I want to take something from them. But
Yeah. And and if Avengers had been good, we'd be really upset about that right now. And I mean, like, I liked a lot of what I played in Avengers, but it really content light and fell flat. Imagine how we'd feel if Spider-Man was launching next month and it was exclusive to Sony, and the game was flourishing beyond that. We as Xbox gamers would be very frustrated by it, and that's not something to celebrate. I don't like
Oh,
that idea.
oh, I understand the importance of exclusives, and we're in the war of services right now. So exclusives are more important now than they've ever been. But it's not
Mm-hmm.
about hardware exclusivity; it's about platform exclusivity. So I think
Right.
that's going to be where Xbox gets creative and says, like, okay, this is exclusive to not necessarily Xbox Game Pass, but this is exclusive to Xbox platform. So you're going to have to either play this on your phone, your PC, or an Xbox console. We're giving
Right.
you options. You don't have to buy a Series X or S to play this, but you're going to have to invest in the Xbox ecosystem in some way if you want to play this. And I
Right.
think their flexibility there makes that easier to digest as to, the way PlayStation is doing it, which is still kind of old school, where you have to have a physical PlayStation 5 console to play their exclusives for now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to change here. We're going to start seeing a lot more PlayStation games come to PC. Not day and date. Xbox is or PlayStation is still, again, kind of set in their ways of like pushing the hardware as the focus. So it won't be day and date, but we will see big PlayStation games come to, as we saw with Horizon Zero Dawn. Um,
Agreed.
Super chat again from True Gamer to clarify. Dang, clarifying with the super chat. Sorry, fellas. Jez was saying ambitious in terms of game projects. That's what I'd like to know more about. Ambitious narratively, maybe, or yeah. So absolutely, we will see some ambitious projects from Xbox in terms of design. One of the new focuses of this generation has not necessarily been graphics. Obviously, we have stuff like ray tracing incorporated, but the big focuses we're going to see revolve around design and AI. Xbox actually just announced their first gaming event of the year for the 23rd, and that is going to focus primarily on AI. And Phil Spencer will be there talking about that. So that kind of shows the scope of Xbox and the ambitions of Xbox to talk about what advanced AI means for game development and how Xbox will leverage that with game design. Everwild is a great example of an ambitious project. We look at Sea of Thieves and what the team at Rare wanted to do with Sea of Thieves, and their goal was to make the pirate game. And it's kind of crazy to think that in 2018 we got the first major like pirate multiplayer game. We've had some MMOs in the past that have been awful, and I've played them because I've wanted a pirate game. I've bought into a lot of terrible pirate experiences in the past just to fill that void. But Sea of Thieves, I think, is the first game that successfully delivered like the pirate game. Everwild is going to focus completely on introducing a new gameplay experience, unlike anything we've seen before, similar to what Rare delivered with Sea of Thieves. So they are entirely focused on new game mechanics and new ways to play games. So that, in terms of ambition, is going to be huge. We've gotten sort of teases from Ninja Theory with Project Mara. That is another ambitious project where they are trying to basically not only tie into like mental health, but also hyper realism, basically photorealistic environments in a game and photorealistic reflections and physics. And those are a couple examples. I mean, a lot of it we haven't seen, and a lot of it's just speculation. But yeah, it's safe to say that Xbox has some really big plans for their premier first party games.
I hope so. I have nothing to offer extra on that. You nailed it. I think you nailed it.
Nailed it. Yeah. So yes, ambitious in terms of game projects, absolutely. When you talk about narratively, that's an interesting question. I would love to see narration kind of revisited and kind of reevaluated in gaming. I don't know if any of you have played What Remains of Edith Finch, but I think that was the last time that I was absolutely floored by the way a narrative was presented in a game. Not only through just the storytelling, but the way that the gameplay mechanics tied into the narrative. So, in my opinion, that is one of the best examples of innovation in narration that we've seen in the last decade. Um, Not necessarily tied to Xbox Game Studios, but I'm hoping teams look at what that independent developer did with a small team and a small budget, and takes cues from that and how they can tell a compelling and powerful story in a video game. Have you played What Remains of Edith Finch?
I've not. Sorry, I didn't know how you wanted me to jump in on that
Oh
one.
no, sorry, that was
No,
just
I
a
have
rant.
not. No, it was a good one. Narrative is such a subjective thing, though, and I think narratively ambitious really falls to the user. I think there are a lot of games that are doing it right now that are ambitious in terms of storytelling. The medium is one of them. I think when the makers of, and you'll have to help me out here,
Oh,
Dark
Bloober team.
Pictures.
Oh wait,
No, I know
oh sorry.
Bloober, but I mean
Okay.
like Dark Pictures Anthology, the people who make them.
Oh yeah, why am I blanking on it? From Dawn Until Dawn. No, that's the game.
Until Dawn is the game. But the point remains that people are experimenting with storytelling methods. Telltale started to experiment in some ways with some of their games, and they got a bit too ambitious, and it folded their company a bit. And I think that when it comes to narrative exploration, Hitman does a really good job of it. There, uh, you can play start to finish all the Hitman games and only discover 10% of the actual narrative that exists within those games. Uh, Ambition is a subjective thing. Are we looking for trying to tell stories that haven't been told well before? Because there's a lot of games and writers right now that are doing that in the LGBTQ plus space and the people of color space, exposing and spotlighting the narratives that those characters or people may go through. And others are trying to talk to you about why you can be relevant in a world of superpowers. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that a story can be ambitious. And I don't think any of these are really what True Gamer was asking us, but it is a road that I enjoy going down because it's so subjective. I've not played some of these games like Edith Finch that are supposedly hyper ambitious in terms of the stories they want to tell, but I've gotten a lot out of other games that to me are really just impressive storytelling, but others wouldn't blip on the radar at all. So there's just so many ways to take that question, and uh, it's pause for thought in the best ways.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's why so many people are excited about the future of Xbox right now, is because there are so many possibilities. Really, with their backing and with what they're trying to build in terms of services and a platform, the sky's the limit. As cliche as that is, they can really do whatever they want. And so I think a lot of people are taking their wildest hopes and dreams and looking at Xbox as a company and their vision and hoping that all lines up. They're hoping everything they want from gaming and what Xbox is trying to do are the same thing, and that they're going to meet here in the middle and they're going to be able to play the greatest games ever made on Xbox Game Pass. And whether or not that'll be the case is yet to be seen, but that would be quite the world to live in when you can boot up Xbox Game Pass and play some of the greatest games ever made. And I hope it gets to that point, just for everyone's sake, because the value of Xbox Game Pass and the doors that open for everyone to play games together is huge. It's like Netflix. Like, Netflix has broken down the barriers of, oh, I don't have HBO, or I didn't see this in theaters. It's like it launches on Netflix. Almost everyone has Netflix, so we can all engage in the conversation about a show or a movie that's on there. The conversations around Tiger King just
Mhm.
dominated the internet for months because we all had access to that dumpster fire of a show, and
Mhm.
we were all able to just embrace it, enjoy it at the same time. And I think that's another reason why the medium has so much conversation around it, is because a lot of people are able to experience it, whether they like it or not. Everyone can have a conversation about that, and that's one of my favorite things about Xbox Game Pass and what that does for the medium, pun intended.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Again, you've capped it off in a perfect way that I don't feel like I can add anything to it, and that's awesome. And also, like as a co-host, I'm like,
Mm, mm,
yes,
mm.
yes.
Oh, Mr. Joanna Dark says super massive when we were trying to figure out the
Oh, that's
developer.
right.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you
thank
for
you.
that, because yeah, I was just brain farting hard over here. Cool. So we got about 10 minutes left in the show. So I'm gonna open it up to just general questions that you guys have. If there's any other topics you want us to cover, drop them in the chat. I really appreciate you guys. If you're new, feel free to sub, like, share, all that stuff. We're here every Saturday. If you're a Sea of Thieves fan, I have a massive piece going up on Monday. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And then while you guys are dropping questions, I'm going to kick it over to Luke where
Mhm.
can people find you? What are you up to? Shamelessly plug away if you want.
I will, and I will take advantage of that opportunity because I am very proud of what I get to do over on the Xbox Expansion Pass, which is a podcast available on all podcast services and newly on YouTube. And when I say on YouTube, it's just the audio files that are there. And I only just opened it up, so I barely have 100 subscribers on YouTube because it's been traditionally an audio based show. The Xbox Expansion Pass is something that's a solo project, and I try to bring on guests of all types from around the gaming industry. Most recently, on the current episode, Rihanna Manuel from G4 and What's Good Games. She joins me to talk about her work in marketing games like Ori and Tell Me Why while she worked at Xbox. And she also talks a lot about her work to spotlight creators of color and in the LGBTQ plus space. That's really cool. Monday's episode will include an interview from Agent 47 himself, David Basin, to talk about his experience being Hitman for 20 plus years. I've also had voices you guys might be familiar with, like Andrea Renee, Ryan McCaffrey, Jeff Grubb, have come on the show. And uh, interviews that stand out to me in my mind, a gentleman named Clayton Kozleric. He's a producer at Xbox, but he does a side project studio of games, most recently making a game called Bartlow's Dread Machine that he did in his spare time. He just started a studio and made. And then Tatiana Delgado, the director of Call of the Sea, has been on the show to talk about her work in that game. And a couple interviews I'm really proud of. Steven Spawn of Able Gamers and Zach Weigel of Gamers Outreach. Those guys do so much to bring gaming to people that are often forgotten or were for so long too often forgotten, whether they were hospitalized for various reasons and Gamers Outreach was bringing them games through gaming carts, or people who are disabled in some way, shape, or form and were left out to dry by a lot of the availability of games requiring a controller or a certain level of input that maybe their bodies didn't allow. And Microsoft's done such a good job spotlighting that with the adaptive controller. Steven Spawn came on to talk to me about that. I'm immensely hopeful that people will check out the Xbox Expansion Pass and see if it's for you. And if it is, stick around, subscribe on your various services, and just see if it's something that's for your pace, because I try to be traditional in some ways and different in others. So yeah, that's where you can find my work. And of course, on Twitter, Miles, they can find me at InsipidGhost, which is my gamer tag as well.
Absolutely, yeah. If you guys are kind of interested in these conversations with industry folks, yeah, Luke has done a really great job getting a lot of really fun and cool people on. So it's worth checking out. Those conversations are something we do a lot on here as well. I think it goes a long way to kind of put a face to the put faces to the industry, and especially when it comes to game development, remind people that video games are made by humans. They are not made by an algorithm. There's a lot of passionate people in the games industry, and despite all of our preconceived notions on everyone's intentions, generally speaking, anyone I've talked to in the games industry, anyone who's committed to producing content in the games industry, does it because they love it. They don't do it because they hate it or want to see it fail. So it's always nice when you have a platform to sit down with folks like that and kind of get some insight as to why they do the things they do and like how they got into it, because everyone's story is a little bit different in our approach. So
I didn't know if I was able to put links in the chat. Mr. Jana Dark asked me to put one in there.
oh yeah, sorry,
Uh,
yeah, feel free to, yeah, I meant to do that actually.
should I do that? I don't want to overstep or put the wrong thing in there.
Yeah, put a space. I think our Streamlabs bot will automatically block a link, so just put a space between like the .com. You should be Gucci.
Try. See if
And
this
then
works.
yeah, at InsipidGhost. Let me put that in here.
Yeah, that threw him off. Hey, thank you, Gunstar. He threw a question there. I'll throw a question while we I think we have Snidex and a few others dropped us one. We heard that the fate of Anthem would be decided this past week. I've not heard anything. Uh I would have loved this kind of alternate universe where Microsoft picked up the rights to Anthem and then made that happen as an exclusive Xbox game, because I loved the flight and the combat of Anthem. Of course, it was content light and it got very repetitive, but I really liked a lot of what Anthem had to offer. It would have been neat for me to see Microsoft swoop in and save that game. Uh, Kind of the way that a lot of people have talked about them maybe doing with Scalebound, which is long since gone. I don't want to bring that up
That
again,
yeah,
but
that
it,
rip
it
that
would have been, yeah. but it would have been a neat narrative, I think, in an alternate universe or in a multiverse category where we could have seen Anthem be saved by Microsoft and do something special there. That's a pipe dream, but it was one that I had as
There,
a fun.
I played the beta and I again felt the same way. Flight was great. Like when you were in combat, it felt really cool and powerful. Everything you were doing had this kind of impact and weight to it. But
Mm-hmm.
the segments in between really showed all the flaws. Like flying from point A to point B, the horrendous load times that it launched with. The more you played, the more you saw was missing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's safe to say that Anthem is dead. Like I don't
Oh yeah, I
foresee
think
a
so too.
world where EA is like, all right, guys, let's go. I thought they were already actively developing it, and it seems like it's been in a incubation period, which means they haven't done a lot when it comes to revamping and relaunching Anthem.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that they're not going to revamp, or they probably had a lot of brainstorming sessions on what we can do to revitalize the player base and revitalize this game. But the fact that there isn't active aggressive development happening already, I don't think it is going to start at this point.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
So pour one
Agree.
out for Anthem. Another prime example of a publisher rushing out a game that was not ready to be released and then just letting it die a slow, horrific death.
Yep. Oh, Cinedex asked if we thought Game Pass would merge with Steam in some way, shape, or form. I remember hearing about that when they had a strategic
Oh
partnership with
yeah.
Razer and mentioning it. Anything on that front? I know nothing about it, and I don't know if that'd be good or bad. I would think Epic Game Store maybe buckled some of those ideas a little bit. But what do you think?
I don't think that's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see a world where Steam and Xbox Game Pass are merged. I mean, obviously Xbox is allowing crossplay to your point there. Um, any Xbox game, studio game that's on Steam is crossplay, like Sea of Thieves, Gears
Mhm.
of War, um, Halo Master Chief Collection. Have they officially rolled out crossplay yet on PC and
They're doing
console?
I mean, if they have, I missed it, but that's because the reason I've missed it is they continuously treat that game with love and attention, so much so that Halo 3 within the MCC is getting a map that never released originally but was part of Halo Online. They
Mm-hmm.
are rolling out so much love for that game. It's really neat to watch the Master Chief Collection evolve from where it was, and it gives me hope that they will treat Halo Infinite the same way over the course of time. But man, Halo Master Chief Collection has just been, man, they have cultivated that from its dismal launch to be something to be very proud of in its current state.
It's wild to think that it was literally unplayable in some aspects when it launched. The Halo
Mm,
3 campaign online multiplayer was completely broken for I think a year. Like it was
mhm,
an obscene amount of time that you could not even play fundamental components of that game online. And then you
mhm,
flash forward to where we are now, and the seasons that they're doing within Master Chief Collection are so fun, like unlocking those
mhm,
cosmetic items just by doing simple things like headshotting grunts. Like there's just
mhm,
silly little things like that that earn you cool rewards, and it makes the value of replaying all these classic games so much more fulfilling. And I really love what they've done with that in regards to the seasons and expanding the rewards for replaying it. Because I mean, I can just go back and replay Halo, and I will and do. But if you give me a dumb little helmet or like a leopard print skin for my warthog for doing it, then yeah, yeah, give me any reason at all to replay Halo, and I'm there in a second.
right. Yep, I agree. I agree.
And I think we had one more question up here that I missed. Oh, with Microsoft needing a developer to help with Killer Instinct, who would you like to make the next entry? Arc System, Arc System Works, NetherRealm, AM2, Virtua Fighter Team.
Oh, that's easy. NetherRealm. NetherRealm easily. I mean, the now often repeated Ed Boon comment about wanting to make a Killer Instinct game for sure comes to mind. But not just that, NetherRealm does a fantastic job with building narratives within fighting games. And while I'm not a big Mortal Kombat guy, I love the Injustice games, and I'm a big DC Comics fan for sure. But I love what they did with Injustice 1 and 2. They told great stories there, and the gameplay is sublime. And I can only imagine what they would do with Killer Instinct, a game that I've always thought was neat, but I never got into. I've always been Street Fighter, then Mortal Kombat, then whatever. Just kind of faded off from there. I would love to see a studio with the quality of NetherRealm that has a proven track record in the past generation, better than any other fighting game maker in this past generation. Uh, Proven to have mass appeal and niche appeal. They do such a good job at cultivating the fighting game community, but also people, schmucks like me who just want to jump in and throw some fireballs around. There's both available within the Mortal Kombat and Injustice sphere. I would love to see what they do with Killer Instinct. Um, I don't know of any other fighting studio that has done both so well on a consistent basis in this past generation.
Yeah, they
What about
basically took the storytelling of fighting games and completely reimagined that. Because Mortal Kombat has always had lore behind it, but
Mhm.
historically fighting game campaigns have been an introductory cutscene and then a cutscene at the end, and that is your storytelling for that character and why they exist in that world. But you look at stuff like Mortal Kombat and Injustice, and they managed to have this compelling, this legitimately enthralling story within a fighting game. So yeah, imagining the Killer Instinct characters getting these brand backstories is super exciting, and I would love to see NetherRealm take that, and especially with their focus on being a like 3D fight, well, not 3D, 2D, 3D fighting studio. I think they would
Yeah,
absolutely kill Killer Instinct.
agreed. Agreed.
Cool.
Oh
Well,
man, this was a blast, dude.
yeah, it's been a great show, man. It's great to sit down and chat with you a little bit. I know we got to talk a little bit on, Game On Live, but you know,
Mhm,
the 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 big appeal of this show is having kind of the one-on-one for the most part, and getting
mhm.
getting to know somebody a little bit better, and giving the audience a chance to kind of get your insights and takes on different topics. It's been a lot of fun. And even despite the fact that news has been slow, we had some great questions from the chat, had some great conversations. So I'm glad we got to get you on for sure.
Yeah, dude, and I hope you'll have me back. I really enjoyed your community in the chat. They seem awesome. I really appreciate you giving me a chance to talk about XEP. And yeah, it was great to meet you, I suppose, on Game On Daily, and then to come over here and have such a good conversation. It time flew by, man. I'm hungry now. I'm like, oh man, it's been 2 hours, and I
I
feel
know
like we
it's
just
it's
started this drink.
lunchtime. I know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
seriously, I was just looking down like when I gave the like 10-minute warning. I was like, "Oh wow, we're coming up on 2 hours. Gotta wrap this on up." But yeah, show Luke some love, guys. Really appreciate everyone who dropped super chats, dropped questions. Like you said, this community is awesome, and there's a consistent group of people returning every week who engage and have fun, and that's one of the main reasons I love doing the live show, is because I can kind of have that engagement interaction with the community. So, yeah, again, let's schedule something in the future, and in the meantime, we will catch you all later. Have a great Saturday, everyone.